Close your eyes. Seriously, just close your eyes for a minute. I want you to picture a 4-year-old little girl. She's got a pixie haircut that's crooked on one side because she cut it herself. She's a ball of energy, loud and laughs with her belly. She hates naps and always fights her bedtime. And before she falls asleep every night, she wishes for a family. She is a foster child. Now open your eyes. Here she is at one of her foster homes. She has been in and out of the foster care system since she was born. Little stability and little consistency. This little girl is me. I still remember this foster home. I remember the Sesame Street stuffed animals that I would cuddle with every night. Stuffed animals that brought me a little comfort. And I remember crying when I was being told that I would leave that foster home, not because I was being sent to a new foster home, but because my favorite stuffed animals couldn't go with me. But I'm not the only one to experience this. This is just a small peek inside the life of a foster child. In 2015, 427,910 kids were in foster care. That is enough to fill the Horseshoe Stadium at Ohio State University 4 times over with just foster kids. That's a lot of kids. And do you know what these kids are using when they're moving from one foster home to the next? They're putting their belongings into a trash bag. A trash bag. What kind of message does that send? What do you put into a trash bag? Spoiled food, disgusting garbage, things you don't want or need anymore. And once you've tied it up, you won't open it again, unless maybe you think you've thrown away something valuable. Could be a wedding ring, could be a retainer. But here at this scary and uncertain time in a child's life, we are throwing their belongings into a trash bag and sending them on their way to a new home. I think we can do better than that. My Sesame Street stuffed animal story is just one small representation of what foster care is like. Flash forward 2 years down the road when I was a senior in high school. I found myself leaving my adoptive family's home when things hadn't worked out, again with trash bags in hand. I had no clue what was next. I had no clue if I would go to college. But my best friend and her family took me into their home. And then they did something that changed the entire course of my life. They co-signed on a loan that made it possible for me to come to college. And that one act has made all of the difference. That one signature, co-signer, was a determining factor between me and a college education. But these incredible people believed in me, and they gave me a shot at a better life. Since then, I've wanted to do the same for foster children, giving them whatever little piece of hope I could. When I got to college, I started interning with an amazing nonprofit called Together We Rise. And their mission is to change the way that foster youth will experience foster care. So they tell the interns that they want us each to fundraise $500 to replace the trash bags that these foster kids are using to move from home to home, a memory I still hold, and switch them out for some awesome duffel bags known as sweet cases. So I give fundraising a go. And I could have explained to people that, one sweet case was just $25, and that was about 5 cups of coffee if you're going to Starbucks. But I thought that on top of just this logical argument, if I was going to ask people for their money, I needed to let them know why it was so important they give, why it was so important to me that they give. So I stood up in front of my sorority, and for the first time in college, I laid it all out on the table. I told my story. I told them that 427,910 kids were in foster care, and that nearly 15 years after I had been through the foster care system, these kids were still traveling from home to home with a trash bag. But these kids are not trash. No kids are. And they deserve to move from one home to the next with a little bit more dignity. I was so passionate, and because I told my personal story, it made it personal for them. Opening up and sharing our personal stories puts us in a vulnerable position, yes. But it is so effective to show people why you care about something and why it is so important that they care too. In these instances, our passion shines through in the most authentic way. In the end, I was overwhelmed. Over $4,000 was donated. And over 160 kids got to put those trash bags where they belong in a garbage can in exchange for some awesome new duffel bags. Duffel bags that they had their own stuffed animal and blanket they would never have to worry about leaving at another foster home. Our most painful experiences can be the driving force for the most positive change. After that internship, I started letting go of the mentality that I was just a victim of the foster care system, and I realized that I was a fighter. And being a fighter meant fighting for these kids to have a better experience than I did. When you rethink what happened to you, and you find a new mindset about your painful experience, it sets you free to react differently. Some of the best change comes from this type of thinking. And when you can create something positive and help others from your negative experience, it is healing, it is restorative, and it is empowering. This idea of rewinding, rethinking, and reacting played out in a larger role when I was accepted to the Foster Youth Internship Program in Washington, D.C. An internship designed for foster youth to embrace their past in order to empower current and future foster youth. I love this internship because it's encouraging young people to take this negative and painful experience and extract some value from it, create positive change, and help other foster youth make sure that they didn't experience the same thing we might have. I spent 10 weeks in Washington, D.C., working on Capitol Hill with the senator and with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. I learned about policy while researching and writing these recommendations based off of my experience in the foster care system. My fellow foster youth interns and I were rewinding, rethinking, and reacting in a big way. We had to rewind to some painful memories. Think about what made a difference and what could have made a difference for us. And then recommend some policy changes to people who had the power to change the foster care system for our future brothers and sisters who would pass through it. We were empowered and on fire to make a difference, to be a voice for that kid that was still buried deep inside of us, to be a voice for this vulnerable population, and to show them that they were not just a product of the foster care system, but that they had the power to be whatever they chose to be, that they had the power to rethink that painful experience and react in a new way. And so do you. After 10 weeks, my fellow foster youth interns and I sat in 2 different briefings, one in the United States Capitol building and another in the White House. We had come from foster care to the White House. We told our stories to members of Congress and to the Domestic Policy Council, and by telling our personal stories, we made it personal for them. Policy suggestions were made. Not every recommendation was implemented, but since this internship program began in 2003, numerous pieces of legislation have been implemented because of the personal stories of foster youth. Foster youth who were brave and fearless and used their story to demand change. I think a lot of the time we find ourselves ashamed of some of our past experiences or where we came from, where we grew up. We don't always want to share or shed any light on it. But one of my favorite quotes says, "You were assigned this mountain to show others that it can be moved." That little girl I told you about, 4 years old, she could have been another statistic on the long list because of where she got her start in life. But guess what? She's standing here today, thankfully with no crooked pixie haircut, but still loud and still ornery and fighting for kids to have the family they so rightfully deserve, and fighting for kids to have the love that they so rightfully deserve. People look at me today and they say that I'm so strong and that they would never imagine that I came from the foster care system. But I, just like so many of my peers, we are strong, we are bold, and we are resilient because we came from the foster care system. And for that, I am proud. I'll end on this. Recently, I met a stranger, and I told her a little bit about my past. At the end of our conversation, she looked at me and she said, you are not meant to carry the burdens from your past. You are meant to carry hope. Carry hope. Do you know what my birth mother named me? Carry hope. So this Tuesday, when you tie up your trash and you carry it down to the end of your driveway, I hope that you will take a minute to think about a foster child who is also carrying a trash bag that night, but with wildly different circumstances. Regardless of what you have been through, your worst experience could inspire the greatest change. And one act can make a huge difference in somebody else's life. I know it has in mine. Thank you. Thank you. And for more information on how you can help replace a foster child's trash bag with a duffel bag, you can visit KeriHopeRichmond.com. Thank you again.